Okay, so guys, on this metals project, you guys have two choices of metal. Okay, so you have copper, which is the one here on the left, and then you have new gold, which is over here on the right. Whatever you guys do, please do not go around saying that you are doing a project out of gold. Okay, people are going to question what we're doing in here. Okay, this is new gold, so it's not gold, it's new gold. Different. Now, with both of these metals, there comes different characteristics. Not all metals are treated the same. So, here are the pros and cons with copper. Okay, the pro with copper is that it is a softer metal. Okay, because it's a softer metal, it does tend to be easier to saw out, file, and to sand. Just doesn't take as long, and it doesn't take as much to do those steps. But on the other hand, because it is soft, it scratches easily. Okay, so softer material is going to get scratched more often. So those are the pros and cons with the copper. New gold, basically the opposite of the copper. Okay, new gold is a harder metal, so it's harder to saw out, it's harder to file, it's harder to sand, harder to polish, but it doesn't get scratched up as much as copper because, again, it's a harder metal. Okay, so give or take one or two, you got to kind of think about what's important to you. Some people don't even necessarily let those characteristics get in the way of their choice. Your choice could just be based on what color metal you prefer. Doesn't have to necessarily be on those characteristics that I just gave you. I will tell you guys that over time with these two different kinds of metal, you're going to see discoloration happen. They're not going to stay bright and shiny forever. It's going to oxidize, okay? And even too, the more that you handle the metal, the more it's going to oxidize and the faster it's going to oxidize because of the oils in your hands and in your skin, okay? So, copper, if you're lucky, what's cool with copper is that you'll actually get some color out of it. When I did a lot of metal work, I would play around with a lot of different kinds of patinas, which are basically chemicals that I would put onto the metal to create colors. You can get blues and greens and just some really neat colors out of copper. You don't necessarily get that when you oxidize, but it kind of gets a nice sort of like reddish brown color to it. The new gold's going to oxidize also too. You can patina new gold also too, but you probably don't get as much color, I think, out as new gold as you do with the copper. But again, you're going to see that the shine is going to kind of dull over time. Now, if you're taking metals next semester or next year, if you guys ever want to, you could just bring in your project you did here in Art 1, bring it into the metal studio, and you can polish it back up and bring it back to a high shine very easily. So there's options for you guys. Okay? All right, so this one is going to actually go on copper. Okay? So when I give you guys your metal, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your piece that you've cut out, and I'm going to spend some time just trying to find a piece of metal that fits your metals piece the closest, okay? So what I'm looking for when I'm choosing that particular piece of metal is that we can have your design hit at least 3 edges of the metal. The reason why for that is because it actually makes it easier to cut out the outside of the design. So if I had a piece of metal that was much bigger than this and the design is essentially floating in the middle of the metal, it would make it really hard for you guys to actually cut out that outside. So when I look at this and I give it to you, I'm going to hand you the metal. I'm going to say, okay, you need to make sure that the design, when you glue it down, touches here, 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 and there. I'm going to tell you where it needs to touch. You need to make sure that you follow those instructions because, again, if you don't, you're probably going to make your life really difficult when it comes to sawing out the outside. And I'll tell you guys, by the time you get to sawing out the outside of the design, you want it to go as quickly as possible, okay? So I'm going to put this design on here like this. She's actually going to get it to touch in several spots, which is going to be great. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be nice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to use rubber cement, okay? And this is what I did back in Miami when I was doing metal stuff. I used rubber cement a lot to kind of glue down my templates onto my metal. the trick with this is to take off as much of that rubber cement as possible, okay? You don't want a huge amount of rubber cement on this because if you do, it's actually just going to fall off. So less is more in this situation. And what I'm going to do is basically paint a thin layer of, hopefully I'm not getting stuff in there, thin layer of rubber cement onto the whole piece of metal there, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing with my piece of paper. I'm just going to use the mat board to kind of cover up the table so it doesn't get rubber cement on it. You can also do this on the top of your, leftover paper from your sketch worksheet. So once you do that, then it gets a little sticky. The goal here is, or the trick is kind of let this just dry just a little bit. You don't want it to be wet when you do this. And then what I'm going to do is very carefully put this on here. Making sure that it touches in those spots. And then if you guys remember, rubber cement doesn't dry right away, so you can kind of move your design if you need to. Just kind of scoot it around. But the trick is when you do that is that you're not tearing your design when you do that. That happens a lot. And then once I've got it set, I'm just going to use my fingers here. I'm just going to push that down to really set it in. And then I'm just going to let the rest of that glue dry on there. And then once it's dry, all I have to do is just rub it off with my fingers and it'll take the remaining glue off, okay? But the trick is you definitely want to wait till that glue dries. Because again, I've had kids try to rub the glue off before it dries and then they just rip off their design off the metal. So let it dry first and then just rub it off. And then that's it. That's all you have to do for today to get done, okay? So there you go.